Everyone stood up as the tall, decorated general entered the room, his chest full of medals, his walk full of confidence. He didn't look left or right, just straight ahead. His boots echoed across the polished floor. The officers, cadets, and senior staff all stood still, eyes locked forward. Every face in the room showed respect, every hand raised in salute. Everyone. Except her. She remained seated in the back row. Young, silent, expression calm, but eyes sharp. She wore a plain uniform, clean but without medals. Not a single badge, not a stripe. Just her name, a Collins. Her hands rested on her lap. Her back stayed straight, but she didn't stand. A few heads turned, noticing her. A whisper passed. Someone cleared their throat loudly, trying to alert her. Still, she didn't move. The general finally reached the front of the room and turned. His sharp eyes scanned the rows. He noticed her instantly. Of course he did. You, he said, pointing toward the back. Why are you sitting? Her voice was quiet but clear. I don't stand for people who don't deserve it. A low gasp rolled through the room like thunder in the distance. A few jaws dropped. One officer looked like he was about to speak, but stopped himself. The general raised an eyebrow. His voice dropped into a deeper, colder tone. What did you say, cadet? She looked him straight in the eyes. I said, I don't stand for people who don't deserve it. He walked slowly toward her. His boots echoed louder now. One step, then another, until he stood just 3 feet in front of her. She didn't flinch. The room held its breath. Do you know who I am? He asked. Yes, she said calmly. Then you understand that what you just did is a violation of protocol and direct disrespect to a superior officer. Yes, she repeated, still calm, still firm. What is your name? Collins. Cadet Abigail Collins. Well, Cadet Collins, the general said, towering over her, either you stand and show respect, or you leave this room and never return. Abigail slowly stood up, not in fear, not in obedience, but with quiet strength. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a photo. A small, worn image, edges curled, colors faded. She held it out. This is why I didn't stand, she said. He took the photo. His hand shook slightly. He stared at the image, a younger man in uniform, bleeding, covered in dust, dragging another soldier on his back through a field of smoke. The man in the photo had piercing eyes full of fire and pain. The corner of the photo had handwriting in black ink. I'll come home, promise. The general's expression changed. His face tightened. His lips moved slightly, almost forming a name. He handed the photo back. Abigail spoke again. That man was my father, Sergeant Marcus Collins. He died in a mission you led, but not before saving your entire squad. The room went silent. Someone near the front looked down at the floor. Someone else clenched their jaw. You left him behind. Abigail continued. You got the medals? You gave the interviews. But you never mentioned his name. That's classified history, the general said, suddenly defensive. We lost many good men. Your father included. But he didn't die in the fight, she said. He died after he saved you. After he dragged your broken body out of enemy fire. After he radioed for hours, help that never came. The general opened his mouth to speak, but she continued. I was 10 when the knock came to our door. I remember my mom falling to the ground. I remember the words they used, killed in action. I remember crying myself to sleep for months. I remember waiting for anyone to honor what he did, but no one did. Now the room was no longer silent. It was frozen. You want respect, she said. Then you tell the truth about what really happened that day. The general's eyes narrowed. You don't know what it's like to lead men, to make hard choices. No, she replied, but I know what it's like to lose a father. And I know what cowards sound like when they dress their silence as strategy. Another murmur rippled through the room. One officer stood up. Cadet, that's enough. No, said another voice, firm, commanding. It came from Colonel Vega, a man who hadn't spoken in weeks. Let her finish. All eyes turned to Vega. His eyes, too, were locked on Abigail. Something in them flickered recognition, maybe even guilt. Abigail reached into her bag and pulled out an old sealed envelope. She held it up. My father wrote this the night before that mission. It was found in his personal items. It's addressed to General Rains. She handed it over. The general hesitated, then took it. He opened the letter with shaking hands. The paper was worn, fragile. He read it silently, eyes moving slowly. As he reached the end, his face lost all color. His lips pressed into a thin line. Abigail's voice cut through the silence. If you won't read it out loud, I will. The general didn't respond. Abigail turned to the room. The letter ends like this. If my daughter ever stands before you, it means I'm gone. If she asks you questions, don't lie to her. Don't bury the truth. Don't hide behind stars and ribbons. Because real leadership means facing the consequences of your actions. And if you ever look her in the eye, remember, you owe her the truth. The general slowly lowered the letter. I was young, he said quietly. I made decisions I thought were right. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe, Abigail asked. He didn't reply. She walked toward the front of the room. Her steps were calm, steady. I joined the academy not because I wanted to wear a uniform. I joined because I wanted to walk the same ground my father did. I wanted to understand what honor meant, what sacrifice really looked like, and now I see. It doesn't always wear medals. She turned to face the officers, cadets, and commanders. Today, I stood for my father, not for the man who forgot him. She turned toward the general one last time. You wanted respect, but you forgot that respect isn't demanded. It's earned. My father earned it. You would still have a long way to go. The room was still. Even breathing seemed too loud. No one moved. No one spoke. The general looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Then, quietly, behind the group, a sound broke the silence, clapping, slow, firm, sincere. It was Colonel Vega. Then another officer joined. Then a cadet. Then the entire room stood not for the general but for her. Abigail didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply nodded and walked out of the room. Outside, the sun was setting. She pulled the photo from her pocket once more, looked at her father's face, and whispered, "They finally heard you, Dad." Back in the room, the general still held the letter. His hands trembled. For the first time in years, the weight of his medals felt heavy, not with pride, but with shame. Then someone entered the room, a man in a black suit. He handed a sealed folder to Colonel Vega. Vega opened it and looked up at the general. "General Rains," he said, "you're being called to a military review board, effective immediately." The general stood silent. He nodded once and walked out. And as the door shut behind him, everyone knew this was just the beginning. Rain began to fall lightly on the academy courtyard as Arya walked out of the records building. She didn't stop to watch the students whisper, or the officers who quickly turned away when she passed. Something had shifted. The silence that once protected the truth had cracked. And now, one name echoed through the base, louder than the general's commands. Caleb Samuels. By noon, more than 200 cadets had signed a petition on unofficial demand for a full investigation into Operation Crimson Echo. Arya hadn't asked them to. She hadn't spoken to anyone since her speech. But someone had listened, and that was enough. Inside his office, General Rains stared at the worn tape recorder still sitting on his desk. He hadn't moved since morning. The tape had been played again, twice. The voice of Caleb Samuels was now louder in his ears than any orders he'd ever given. A sharp knock came. He didn't answer. Colonel Vega walked in anyway. "Notice," Vega asked, "that the general didn't speak. They're forming the board. Testimonies begin in 3 days." Still no answer. Vega took a deep breath. "Do you remember what he said to me before the mission started?" Caleb looked me in the eyes and said, "If we don't come back, make sure someone does the right thing." I didn't, not for 30 years. The general's voice finally broke through, low, hoarse. "We were young," Vega nodded, "but now we're old, and silence doesn't look like strength anymore. It looks like shame." The general closed his eyes. Meanwhile, Arya sat alone, in the old mess hall, her fingers running along the edges of the red-striped file she'd copied earlier. She stopped at one specific page, a list of team members from the mission. One name had been blacked out. She held it to the light. She took a photo with her phone and ran it through a simple light filter. Slowly, faintly, the name appeared. Staff Sergeant Damon Ellis. She didn't recognize the name, but someone might. She walked back to the courtyard and found Cadet Lauren, a research assistant with access to military personnel databases. "Can you find something for me?" Arya asked. Lauren hesitated. "If I get caught, it's for a man who died saving his unit." A name the system tried to erase. Lauren nodded. "What's the name?" "Damon Ellis." Lauren tapped fast. Scanned files. Frowned. "That name's listed as Kya, but not under Crimson Echo. Says he died in a separate operation months earlier, but that's not true." Arya said. "No," Lauren said quietly. "It's not. This file's been edited." They both knew what that meant. Someone wanted him off the record. Arya whispered, "Why?" Arya stared at the screen. "Because he knew something, or did something." Lauren leaned closer. "Look, there's an old address. It's in the city, under family contact info. Can you print it?" Within minutes, Arya was out the gates, and on a public tram headed to the edge of the city. She didn't know what she was walking into. All she had was a name, a redacted file, and a growing need to finish what her father started. She found the house small, old, with peeling paint, and a broken porch light. She knocked twice. No answer. Knocked again. Then the door opened slowly. An elderly woman stood behind it. Eyes tired, hair silver, posture straight. "Are you related to Damon Ellis?" Arya asked gently. The woman nodded. "I'm his sister." "Who are you?" "I'm Arya Samuels. My father served with your brother, in Crimson Echo." The woman stiffened. "That's a name I haven't heard in years. Can we talk?" She nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the house was quiet, filled with old books and dusty photographs. One picture sat on the mantel, 3 soldiers, arm in arm, smiling. "That's Damon," the woman said, pointing to the middle. "The others. One of them was your father, right?" Arya stepped closer. "Yes, that's him. Caleb Samuels." The woman touched the frame. "He was the reason Damon joined. Said Caleb was the bravest man he'd ever met." Arya sat down. "Did your brother ever say anything about that mission?" The woman's eyes darkened. "Only once, the night before he died. He called me, said if anything happened, I should protect a small box he kept in the attic. Said it had the truth. I didn't know what he meant. Arya's heart pounded. Do you still have it? 10 minutes later, they stood in a dim attic filled with boxers. The woman pointed. It's that one. Arya opened it. Inside, a cassette, a small notebook, and a flash drive. The notebook was thin but filled with short, frantic entries, reports, details, sketches of maps, and at the end, one line circled in red ink. He gave the order to leave them behind. I won't follow that kind of leadership. The cassette was labeled, Field Audio Day 4. Arya tucked everything into her bag. Thank you, she said. The woman nodded. Do what Damon couldn't. Back at the academy, Colonel Vega sat in his quarters, reading his own hidden journal. He'd buried it years ago, but now the pages felt like a second chance. A knock at Arya entered. Breathless. I found something, she said. They sat together and listened to the new cassette. Damon's voice this time. If this gets out, I'm dead. But I can't live knowing what we did. Caleb wanted to stay, so did I, but the order came from the top: leave the wounded. Forget the missing, save the mission. His voice cracked. They left Caleb because he was inconvenient. Because heroes with no medals make the decorated ones look smaller. Arya turned to Vega. How far does this go? Vega closed his eyes. Farther than you think. That night, a secret meeting was held. 5 senior officers, Arya, Vega, and Lauren, they laid everything on the table. Photos, letters, tapes, files. One officer spoke up. This isn't just about one mission. It's about the system that protected the lie. Another nodded. If this reaches public hearing, careers will end. Arya stood. Good, maybe then, lives will begin. The next morning, the Academy issued a statement. A tribunal would be held to review Operation Crimson Echo. Witnesses would be called, records would be unsealed, and the family of Sergeant Caleb Samuels would be granted front row seats. General Rains read the memo in silence. He knew what it meant. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a ribbon. Not a medal, just a ribbon faded and thin. It had once belonged to Caleb Samuels. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in decades, he whispered his name. Caleb, I'm sorry, but for some things, sorry would never be enough. The letter lay on her desk like a quiet threat. Arya stared at it for a long time, fingers tracing the words. They won't go down without a fight. Be ready. She didn't know who had written it, but the message was clear: someone inside the Academy, someone who knew the truth was dangerous. The next morning, her room was inspected, officially. It was called a routine sweep, but they didn't touch anyone else's quarters, just hers. They took the original letter from her father, the tapes, even the medic's diary Vega had just received. She confronted the officers as they left. This isn't legal, she said firmly. The lead investigator looked her in the eye. National Security Cadet, stay in line. When they left, she stood frozen, heart racing, hands clenched. They were trying to silence her again. She ran straight to Colonel Vega's office. They took everything, she said, out of breath. He stood slowly. I figured they might, but I made copies of the diary pages. Kept the recordings on a separate drive. Her eyes widened with hope. You did? I served with your father, he said quietly. I knew this wouldn't be a clean fight. That night, they met Lauren and 3 other cadets in a quiet corner of the library basement, an old war room, unused for years. The copies were spread across the table. The drive was plugged into a protected laptop. They organized everything like evidence, each item labeled, time-stamped, documented. They were building a case, not just against General Rains, but the entire cover-up. Arya pointed to the list. We need to find the last living member of Crimson Echo, someone who's not afraid to talk. Lauren nodded and opened her laptop. There's one name still, listed as active reserve, Lieutenant Jonah Brooks. He lives 2 towns over. Arya stood up. Let's go. The next morning, they drove through the hills in Vega's old truck. Jonah Brooks lived in a small wooden house at the edge of the forest. They knocked twice. The door opened. A tall man, late 60s, stood in the doorway. His face had deep lines, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at them without surprise. You're Caleb's daughter, he said. Arya nodded. He stepped aside. I was wondering how long it'd take you to find me. Inside, the house smelled of pine and old leather. Military photos lined the walls. One caught her eye: 5 men posing with rifles. Her father stood in the center. That was the day before the mission, Jonah said. We were all so proud, so sure. He poured coffee. No sugar, no milk, just strong and hot. I read the reports, Arya said, but I need your words. Jonah looked down for a moment, then back at her. Caleb saved me. I was hit, bleeding bad. Rains ordered us to leave, said we couldn't afford to lose any more, but Caleb refused. He dragged me through the jungle. For 6 hours, I begged him to go ahead, to leave me behind. He wouldn't. Tears welled up in Arya's eyes. I woke up 2 days later in a field tent. Jonah continued. They told me Caleb died, but they never told me what really happened. And when I asked, doors closed. Vega leaned forward. Would you testify? Jonah didn't hesitate. Yes, it's long overdue. They left with a video recording of his statement, time-stamped, and signed. It was raw, powerful, unshakable. That same afternoon, word arrived. The Military Review Board had officially approved. A public hearing, witnesses would speak, evidence would be presented. The date was set for 1 week later, but by the evening, news channels were already covering the story. Leaks had started. Arya's name, her face, and her father's photo were now all over the country. Some called her a hero, others called her a traitor. The next morning, Arya's academy email was shut down. Her access badge failed at every door. She had been suspended. Pending investigation, she wasn't surprised. Vega found her sitting alone on the steps of the old gym. "They're trying to break you," he said. She looked up. "They won't." He sat beside her. "You're stronger than I ever was," he said. "And you've already done what most soldiers never get to do. You've started a real war." "I didn't want a war," she whispered. "Just the truth." "Truth is dangerous when it threatens power," Vega replied. 3 days before the hearing, she received another envelope, this time hand-delivered. Inside was a photo of her father's coffin, only the coffin. No funeral, no family. Just a black-and-white shot from a military file. One word was written on the back, erased. She stood for a long time holding the photo, then she walked to the base chapel, knelt at the empty altar, and whispered, "They tried to erase you, Dad, but look around now. You're everywhere." On the day before the hearing, Jonah Brooks fell ill. Severe food poisoning. It was sudden, too sudden. Lowen called Arya in a panic. He said someone came to his house yesterday, claimed to be from the board. They asked him to clarify his statement. He hasn't been the same since. "Someone tried to silence him," Arya said, coldly. "Jonah survived but couldn't speak at the hearing. It didn't matter." Vega took the stand. Then the medic's diary was read aloud. Then the voice recordings were played. Then Arya stood before the review board. "My father was a soldier, a protector, a man who believed in duty, and you repaid that with silence. You covered your medals with his blood. But today, that silence ends." The board members looked shaken. The gallery behind them was packed. Officers, cadets, reporters. Every eye watched. Every camera recorded. When she finished, no one clapped. They just stood, all of them. Even the officers who once tried to ignore her. Even General Rains, who sat at the edge of the room, face pale, hands folded tightly. The board requested a 24-hour review period before their ruling. That night, Arya sat by the academy statue, the bronze soldier, who stood watch over the parade ground. She didn't feel victorious. She felt empty, but she also felt close to her father, like he was sitting beside her. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I brought your name home." At dawn, she walked to the base wall again. This time, she carried a chisel. She stood in front of the cold stone that had left out his name, and quietly, without permission, she began to carve. Letter by letter, Caleb Samuels. By the time guards arrived, the name was done. She didn't run, she didn't explain. She just turned around and waited for whatever came next. The morning air was sharp, carrying with it the echo of heavy boots. Arya stood motionless in front of the stone wall, dust on her hands, her father's name freshly carved. The guards surrounded her, but no one moved. The silence between them was almost respectful. Finally, one of the guards broke the moment. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." She nodded without a word. Inside the disciplinary chamber, the atmosphere was cold and formal. Arya sat straight, hands folded, her uniform still covered in stone dust. Across from her sat a new face, Major Delcroft, head of internal security. He stared at her like she was a puzzle he didn't quite understand. "You defaced federal property," he began, tone clipped. "That alone is grounds for expulsion." I corrected a lie," she replied calmly. He raised an eyebrow. "You went against orders, bypassed protocol, leaked classified documents, and involved the media. That's not correction, it's rebellion." She leaned forward. "No, what you call rebellion, I call courage. What you call exposure, I call truth. This academy trained me to defend honor. That's exactly what I did." There was a pause. Then Delcroft's voice softened, not out of kindness, but calculation. "Did it ever occur to you that your father's actions, if true, could shake this military to its core? That you're not just carving his name, but cracking the entire foundation?" She met his eyes. "Then maybe the foundation needs fixing." By the afternoon, she was placed under official investigation. Her movements were restricted. Her access was revoked. She couldn't step near the memorial again, but it didn't stop her, because something else happened that same day. An unexpected visitor showed up at the academy gates, an elderly woman in a military widow's dress. She held a folded flag in her arms and walked with a cane. She waited silently for hours until finally, Arya was escorted to meet her in the garden. The woman looked up. Her eyes were soft but sharp. "I knew your father," she said. "He saved my husband during the siege at Everfall Ridge, brought him back across enemy lines. He never talked about it, but my husband did. Every single day until he died." Arya was stunned. I didn't know. None of us did," the woman replied. "Because when we tried to speak, we were told to stay quiet. They said honoring Caleb would bring up unpleasant details." that it would distract from the medals already given out. She reached into her purse and handed Arya an old photo. Caleb holding a bloodied soldier, smiling faintly, his shirt torn, his arms covered in dirt and wounds. My husband always said, the woman whispered, Caleb was the only reason he made it home. It's time they let the world know. That night, the Academy's cadet network lit up. Dozens of stories, names, and files began appearing online. Non-official records, hidden testimonies, unreported acts of heroism. Every thread pointed to one name, Caleb Samuels. Someone had opened the floodgates. Even the press picked it up. The hero they erased made front-page headlines. One news anchor began his segment by asking, how many heroes have we silenced for convenience? The military tried to contain it, but the truth had already gone viral. Inside the academy, a quiet shift was happening. Cadets who once whispered about Arya now nodded in her direction. Some even saluted, not because they were told, but because they chose to. Colonel Vega called her to his office late that evening. You've started a storm, he said, and storms don't ask permission. He slid a folder across the desk. What's this? She asked. An internal memo. It shows that Rains personally altered the official Crimson Echo report. He signed it the day after your father died. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Why are you showing me this now? Because you'll need it tomorrow, Vega said. The board reconvenes. They're calling Rains to the stand. She stared at the folder. Her father's name, again, erased and overwritten. But not this time. The next day the hearing room was even more packed. Reporters lined the back. Cadets filled the seats. Officers who once tried to stay silent now leaned forward, waiting. General Rains entered through the side door, dressed in full uniform, ribbons shining on his chest. He took the stand. His voice was calm, measured. I have served this military for 43 years, he began, and I have always upheld its code. He told the same version of the Crimson Echo story he had always told about a tragic mission, a heroic loss, and a failed extraction. He never once mentioned Caleb Samuels by name. Arya was called next. She walked to the center of the room, folder in hand. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked at the people watching, the ones who now knew the truth. Then she turned to Rains. You once asked me if I wanted justice or revenge, she said softly. Today, I answer you clearly. I want history to tell the truth. Not just about my father, but about who we become when we hide from it. She opened the folder and read the memo aloud. Then she held up the diary, then the photo from the widow, and finally she played a recording. It was Jonah Brooks' voice, weak from illness, but clear enough to be heard. Caleb Samuels. He saved me. He disobeyed a direct retreat order to bring me back alive. Rains left us. He didn't return. The room was dead silent. Arya's voice shook but only slightly. General Rains, she said, do you deny this? He stared at her. The calm mask cracked. I did what I had to do, he said coldly. War demands sacrifice. You mean silence? She replied. You mean lies? The board dismissed her to deliberate as she left the room. Her legs felt heavy but her spirit did not. Outside, the sky was gray, and on the parade ground something unexpected was happening. Dozens of cadets had gathered. Silently they had formed a line, each holding a small piece of paper, each with Caleb Samuels' name written on it. They stood still, as if building a living memorial. No orders, no instructions, just respect. As Arya stepped onto the field, they parted and let her walk through. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense that she wasn't alone anymore. But as she reached the edge of the line, Lauren ran up to her, out of breath. Arya, something's wrong. She held out her phone. A news alert blinked on the screen. Breaking. Mysterious fire destroys military archive housing. Crimson Echo files. Arson suspected. Arya's heart stopped. They're still trying to burn him, she whispered. Lauren nodded. And we might be next. Smoke still lingered in the sky the next morning. The archive fire had gutted an entire wing of the military records building. Ashes drifted through the air like falling feathers, each one a piece of someone's forgotten truth. Arya stood near, the blackened ruins, eyes stinging, fists clenched. They burned everything, Lauren said beside her. The original mission tapes, the written orders, even the squad manifest, gone. But Arya didn't blink. Not everything. They can burn paper, but they can't erase what people know, and they can't silence us all. That day, she filed an official complaint with the ethics committee. An unprecedented move by a cadet. Most told her it wouldn't go anywhere, that generals didn't answer to students. But Arya wasn't trying to win a court case anymore. She was trying to wake a sleeping army. Inside the academy, whispers grew louder. Cadets met in empty classrooms. After hours, they reviewed what Arya had uncovered. One by one, they shared stories of their own relatives who were dismissed, downgraded, or pushed aside because they refused to play political games. What had started as a daughter's mission, to honor her father, was turning into a movement. That afternoon, Colonel Vega called her into his office again. His face was pale. You've stirred something too big to contain, he said quietly. I'm not trying to contain it, she replied. I'm trying to expose it. Vega handed her a sealed envelope. This came anonymously, he said. I haven't opened it yet, but something tells me you should. Arya took the envelope, broke the seal, and pulled out a single photograph. It was old, faded, but clear enough to recognize two figures: Caleb, Samuels, and General Rains, standing side by side. Caleb's arm around an injured soldier, looking away, and scrawled on the back, in shaky handwriting, "He watched Caleb save us." Then he walked away. TRTR, Arya asked. Vega nodded slowly. Lieutenant Thomas Reyes, presumed dead, but what if he's not? The next 3 days became a search mission. Lauren worked the back channels. Vega reached out to old intelligence contacts. Arya sent a private message to every veteran community she could find online. Finally, they got a reply. It was short. "I'm alive. I saw it all. Meet me." Coordinates were attached. A small cabin in the northern highlands. Off-grid, untraceable. Against everyone's advice, Arya went. She didn't take a military car. She borrowed an old Jeep from a friend and drove through the mountains, alone. Snow was beginning to fall when she arrived. The cabin was small, quiet, smoke curled from the chimney. She knocked once. An older man opened the door. Weathered face, sharp eyes. "Reyes?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment. "You've got his eyes. Come in." Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and old paper. Maps covered the walls. A single medal sat on the shelf, covered in dust. "I don't talk to many people," he said, "but I saw what you're doing, and you deserve the truth." He poured 2 cups of coffee, then sat across from her. "I was with your father on the last day," he began. Rains gave the retreat order. Caleb refused. He said no one gets left behind, not under his watch. His voice trembled slightly. We heard screaming. 2 men were pinned under a downed carrier. Rains wouldn't go back. Caleb did. Carried them one by one, took 2 bullets. Still didn't stop. Arya's eyes burned. He handed me the last soldier and told me to run. Said if anyone makes it out, they should tell the truth. Then the airstrike came. Everything vanished. Reyes reached under the table and pulled out a small metal box. "I kept this," he said. "It's all I had time to grab before I disappeared." He opened it slowly. Inside were 3 items: a rusted dog tag, a blood-stained mission patch, and a tiny voice recorder. "I recorded my report that same night," he whispered. "No edits, no filters." Arya picked it up carefully. "It's not just evidence," she said. "It's a voice no one has heard in 20 years. Reyes looked at her, a sad smile on his face. "Your father died a hero. Now it's time the world hears him roar." She drove back in silence, the recorder clutched tightly in her lap. Snow piled on the sides of the road, but inside, something was warming, a fire of purpose she hadn't felt since this journey began. Back at the academy, Lauren and Vega waited anxiously. "Did you get it?" Lauren asked. Arya nodded and placed the recorder on the table. They played the audio. Rhea's voice was shaky but strong. Every detail matched. He named names. He gave coordinates. He described the exact moment Caleb shielded a soldier from gunfire, with his own body. But the most powerful part came at the end. "I owe my life to Caleb Samuels. The army never asked for my truth. They were too busy polishing medals, but I speak it now. For him, for his daughter, for every name they erased to keep theirs shining." The room was silent when the tape ended. "This," Vega said softly, "is the hammer." Be prepared to present it at the next public hearing, this time in front of national press. But the night before the session, Arya received another anonymous letter. "Don't show the tape. People are watching you. Some of them don't want the truth out. You're in danger." Lauren was furious. "This is intimidation. They're trying to break you." Arya shook her head. "They're scared. That means we're winning." But she knew the risk was real now. The next day, the hearing began under tight security. Metal detectors, guards, even drones patrolling overhead. Reporters from across the country filled the seats. Arya stepped forward, holding the recorder. She pressed play. Rhea's voice filled the room. People gasped. Some wept. Even a few officers stood still, eyes closed, as if reliving memories long buried. And then, just as the recording ended, the power shut off. Darkness swallowed the room. Gasps echoed in the blackness. Then a single red light blinked on a camera. Someone was still recording. Power returned moments later. Confusion reigned. Officials scrambled. But Arya didn't panic, because something had changed. That camera was her. Proof. Someone in the room wanted the world to see. She stepped back to the podium. "You can shut off the lights," she said. "You can't hide anymore. The truth is coming. One voice at a time." And as she walked out of the room, her heart racing, her phone buzzed with a single message. "They know who you are now. Be careful. They're not done." The moment Arya stepped out of the hearing room, a chill crawled up her spine, not from the cold, but from the silence. Cameras had captured the explosion of truth. The tape was out. And now, the world was watching. Overnight, the footage went viral. Veterans reposted it with hashtags like #JusticeForCaleb and #TheForgottenHero. Civilians flooded forums, demanding answers. Even academy instructors whispered her name with a mixture of awe and fear. But not everyone celebrated. At dawn, Arya returned to her dorm room and found the door slightly ajar. She froze. Inside, drawers were pulled out, her desk was scattered, her laptop was missing. The photo of her father had been ripped from its frame and crumpled on the floor. Lauren rushed in seconds later. Someone got in. It wasn't random. They were looking for something. They already took the tape, Arya said slowly, but maybe they think I still have more. Lauren hesitated. Do you? Arya pulled out a flash drive from her jacket pocket. Backup copy. I uploaded everything to a private server. And there's a second copy hidden. If anything happens, to me this story still lives. Colonel Vega arrived an hour later, grim-faced. They're escalating, he said. An unmarked car was seen circling the dorm last night. I filed a report, but don't expect action. They're trying to scare me, Arya replied. But I'm not stopping. That day, a press conference was held by the Defense Ministry. General Rains appeared on screen.com and composed. We are aware of the rumors circulating online. While we respect the emotions surrounding these claims, we urge the public not to jump to conclusions based on incomplete or altered information. Arya sat in the Academy's common room watching the broadcast. Around her, cadets murmured in disbelief. He's calling it a rumor, one cadet said. He didn't even mention Caleb's name, said another. But Arya noticed something else stopped behind Rains. On a display board were several mission logs and timelines. One of them had been marked classified, Operation Nightfall. She leaned forward. Nightfall. It wasn't the same name as the mission her father died in, or was it? She returned to her notes, flipping through pages and audio files. That's when it hit her. Operation Crimson Echo, her father's mission, had a coded reference in a 2003 memo. But another document, leaked during Vega's intel sweep, referred to a Nightfall fallback, a cover name. What if Crimson Echo was renamed? She said aloud. Lauren's eyes widened. To bury the connection, rename the mission. Change the files, hide the truth under layers. They needed confirmation. Arya contacted Reyes again. He didn't answer. Hours passed. Still nothing. Then a new message arrived from a different number. Reyes is gone. You're next if you don't walk away. Her hands shook. He warned me, she whispered. He knew this was coming, but grief couldn't stop her now. She owed Reyes and her father the full story. She met with Colonel Vega that night in a secluded courtyard on base. Moonlight filtered through the branches overhead. They took Reyes, she said quietly. I know, Vega replied. They're silencing anyone who can prove the truth. That's why we move faster. He handed her a folder. Internal audit logs, he explained. They show edits made to the mission files. Nightfall replaced Crimson Echo 2 weeks after the operation ended. But here's the key look at who signed off. Arya opened the folder, her eyes locked on the name LT General Rains. He didn't just fail your father, Vega said. He covered it up himself. That night, Arya posted a letter to her public page. She didn't name names, but she asked questions. Why are mission records being rewritten? Why are whistleblowers disappearing? Why is a soldier who saved lives still erased from history? The letter ended with a single promise. I will not stop until the truth is engraved in stone, not ashes. The post exploded across social media. Young soldiers reposted it with their own stories of cover-ups. Retired officers offered anonymous tips. The pressure on the Defense Ministry mounted. 3 days later, they cracked. A panel was announced. An independent investigation into Operation Nightfall, but it came with a warning. Arya would not be allowed to testify. No students. No cadets. Only decorated veterans and official personnel. They're boxing me out, she told Lauren. Then find another way in. Lauren said. She did. On the day of the hearing, Arya walked into the hall not as a cadet, but as a civilian, witnessed back by 10 retired officers who had served with her father. They entered together. The panel couldn't stop them. They were given 30 minutes. Arya stood before the room. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She told her father's story, played the tape, showed the recovered photo, held up Reyes' dog tag. She ended with a single question. How many more names have you buried to protect your careers? Silence. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Then the whole room, even some officers on the panel, stood up. General Rains didn't. He left quietly. Later that night, Arya returned to her dorm room, exhausted. She found a small envelope under her pillow. Inside was a single line, written in neat handwriting. You opened a door, now prepare for what walks through it. She looked up, her heart pounding, because something told her. This wasn't over, it was only the beginning. Arya stood frozen as the armed man stepped out of the trees, boots crunching dry leaves beneath him. His weapon was pointed low, but steady just enough to remind her who was in control. His face was hidden behind a black scarf, but his voice carried the roughness of someone who had seen too much. You were warned, he said again. Lauren slowly raised her hands. We're not here to fight. He didn't move. Then why are you here? This site is off limits, shut down, forgot. A reason, Arya swallowed. Because my father died for something buried here, and I won't leave until I find out what it was. A long pause. Then, slowly, the man lowered his weapon. You really are his daughter, he said, voice softer. He said you'd come. One day. I just didn't think it'd be this soon. Arya blinked. You knew him? I served with him. Under Operation Crimson Echo, before they changed its name. Before they erased us all. He motioned for them to follow and led them. Around the outer fence, the gates were too rusted to open, but he pushed aside some brush, revealing a narrow tunnel under the wall. They crawled through silently and emerged inside the ruins. The compound was crumbling, walls cracked, old gear rusting, shattered windows open to the wind. But deeper inside, past 2 sealed bunkers and a collapsed stairwell, was a reinforced hatch. Unlike everything else, this door was spotless. No dust, no decay. This is the vault, the man said. Your father called it Omega, we just called it the grave. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old code disk. He left this with me, told me to use it only if his daughter ever came looking. Arya took the disk in, shaking hands. Why me? Because you were never supposed to be part of this war, but they dragged you, and the moment they buried him, the disk clicked into the panel. Lights flickered. The hatch opened with a hiss of stale air. Inside, everything was preserved. Cabinets lined the walls, marked with cryptic codes and sealed tags. A desk sat in the center, with a single data terminal. Arya moved toward it slowly, heart pounding. The man followed. He said the truth would break you, make you question everything. I'm ready, she whispered. She activated the terminal. The screen lit up with a blinking prompt. Log Operative Caleb Ward. Final entry. Her father's voice filled the chamber. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone. And it's probably because of this mission. He spoke of orders that didn't make sense. Of targeting coordinates inside Allied zones. Of a classified transport that vanished mid-air, and the order to recover the asset at all costs. But it wasn't a weapon, it was a girl. Arya's eyes widened. A child, Lauren asked. Her father's voice continued. She was no older than 9, found in a capsule marked Omega variant. She didn't speak, but the scans showed genetic enhancements. Weaponized DNA. She wasn't lost, she was planted. The log trembled with emotion. I couldn't follow orders. I refused. I got her out, hid her, and that's when they came for me. The audio ended. The silence in the vault was thick, heavy. Arya backed away from the terminal. He died protecting her, and they covered it all, Lauren whispered. So where's the girl now? She's still out there, the man said. I helped him hide her, that's why I stayed here, to make sure they never found her again. Arya turned to him. Then take me to her. He shook his head. No one knows where she is. Not anymore. That was the deal. But if she's the key, they'll come for her again. And when they do, I need to be ready. The man paused, eyes searching hers. Then he slowly handed her a small steel cylinder. Your father said this would help when the time came. Inside was a chip. No markings. No explanation. What's on it? Only she can unlock it. That night, Arya sat outside the vault, looking at the stars through broken beams. Her mind raced with questions. Who was the Omega girl? What had they done to her? And how far would the generals go to keep it all hidden? Back at the academy, chaos had begun. A mysterious hack had leaked parts of the vault log, just enough to raise suspicion but not enough to confirm the truth. Public forums lit up. Was the military creating super soldiers? What was Omega variant? Who was the girl? General Rains held another press briefing, face like stone. These rumors are dangerous. They threaten national security and our service members' integrity. We are launching a full investigation into the source of these malicious leaks. Arya's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. She was already marked at Lauren. Meanwhile, found something strange. The chip your father left, it's protected by biometric encryption. You mean a scan? Lauren nodded. Not just any scan, a heartbeat signature. It has to match someone specific. And I think it's the girl, Arya whispered. Then, we have to find her. How do you find a ghost? The man who guided them out of the vault gave them one last piece of advice. Your father left me coordinates one place. The girl might go if something ever happened to him. But it's dangerous. Remote, no signals, no backup. Arya took the note. There was no hesitation in her voice. Then that's where I go next. As they left the compound, a drone watched from above, hidden in the trees. Its lens blinked red, sending data to a private channel deep within military command, inside a secure bunker hundreds of miles away. General Rains watched the footage. Behind him, a figure in shadows spoke quietly. She's getting close. Rains clenched his fist. Then it's time we remind her what happens to traitors. The shadowed figure nodded, and the girl. Rains turned slowly. Bring her in, dead or alive. Arya didn't sleep on the train ride north. She stared out the window as the snowy ridges passed by, quiet, untouched, like they were hiding something beneath. In her lap, the small steel cylinder sat wrapped in cloth. The chip inside hadn't moved, but it felt heavier every mile they traveled. Lauren sat across from her, arms crossed, watching people come and go at every stop. We're being followed, she finally said. Arya nodded. I know. I saw the same man in the last 2 stations. Military haircut, civilian coat, always pretending to read. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They just got off the train. 2 stops early. An old freight truck waited for them, arranged by the man from the vault. Its driver, a quiet woman in her 50s, didn't ask questions, just handed Arya a folded map and said, follow the blue markers. When the road ends, walk 2 miles northeast. There'll be a fence with no gate. Go under. They rode in silence, no lights, no signal, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of snow crunching under tires. When the truck finally stopped, it was pitch black. No towns, no towers, just a frozen forest, wrapped in fog. Why would she hide here? Lauren asked, teeth chattering, because it's the last place anyone would look. They walked carefully, guided only by moonlight and a fading compass. The snow was deep, nearly up to their knees, and the cold cut through their jackets like glass. But they didn't stop. They found the fence-twisted metal, half collapsed, and crawled beneath it just as the sun began to rise. And then they saw it, a cabin dot, small, isolated, hidden by a cluster of trees, and painted the color of old stone. It didn't look like much, but Arya's heart told her they'd found the right place. They knocked. No answer. Lauren reached for the door handle, but it clicked open on its own. Standing in the doorway was a girl, no older than 18, dark curls, sharp eyes, and a quiet intensity that froze them both in place. She didn't speak. She just stared at Arya, and then slowly, very slowly, she stepped forward and reached out, touching Arya's chest with 2 fingers. She was feeling Arya's heartbeat. Then she whispered, "It matches." Arya's breath caught. "What?" The girl looked down at the wrapped cylinder. "The chip. It's tuned to my biofrequency. Your father must have calibrated it with my pattern." Lauren took a careful step forward. "What's your name?" The girl didn't blink. "I don't have one," Arya said softly. "He called you Omega. That's what they labeled me. I was a prototype. A failure, they said. Too human." Arya shook her head. "That's not a failure. That's survival." The girl studied her face. "You're his daughter. Caleb's. You have his eyes." Tears built in Arya's throat. "He died protecting you." "I know," the girl said quietly. "I felt it." They went inside. The cabin was simple, bare, almost. A fire burned low in the hearth, and a few books sat stacked in the corner. The only piece of tech was a small scanner embedded in the wall. The girl motioned toward it. "Give me the chip." Arya handed it over without hesitation. The girl placed it into the scanner and laid her palm on the panel. The device beeped once, then whirred to life. A holographic projection lit up the CABINA 3D map. Military zones, dozens of red markers. Lauren leaned closer. "What are we looking at?" The girl pointed to the center. "That's the facility where I was made. Project Sentinel Core. They didn't just create me, there are others." Arya stepped back. "How many?" "At least 6, maybe more. All raised in isolation, trained like weapons. I escaped because your father broke protocol. The others weren't so lucky," Lauren whispered, "and now the generals want to activate them." "Yes," the girl said, "and if they succeed they won't need soldiers anymore. They'll use us." Arya clenched her fists. "We can't let that happen." Suddenly the fire went out, all lights dimmed. A quiet beeping echoed from the scanner. "We've been tracked," the girl said. "They found the activation pulse before they could react." The windows shattered. Gas canisters rolled in. "Run," Arya shouted, grabbing the girl's arm. They burst through the back door just as shadows dropped from the trees. Black-suited commandos with masks and stun guns. Arya fired blindly behind them with the emergency flare gun. The explosion lit up the forest, buying them a few seconds. They ran toward the river. Shots echoed behind them. Lauren screamed. Falling to her knees, hit in the shoulder, Arya turned back, pulling her up with raw strength. The girl took Lauren's other side. "I see a boat," the girl shouted. "Old, but it'll float." They threw Lauren in and pushed off. Bullets hit the water behind them, but none reached the boat. They disappeared into the fog, paddling in silence as their breath turned to steam. When they reached the opposite bank, the girl helped them into a hidden rock cave she had used before. There was no fire, no sound, just darkness and shallow breathing. Arya knelt beside Lauren and checked her shoulder. "It's not deep, but she needs a medic. There's one 3 miles from here," the girl whispered. "A village woman, she helped me once." Arya stayed with Lauren while the girl went for help. For the first time in days, Arya was alone with her thoughts. She looked down at her hands, shaking from adrenaline, from fear, from rage. "They'll keep coming," she whispered to herself. "Unless we stop them first." Hours passed. Finally, the girl returned with an old woman in thick coats and weathered skin. She said nothing but got to work, cleaning the wound, stitching it gently, wrapping it tight. Lauren groaned but didn't wake. "She healed," the woman said, "but not quickly." Before leaving, the woman pressed a cloth into Arya's hand. Inside was a silver key. She said your father gave it to her, long ago, told her to keep it safe. Arya stared at the key. It was engraved with a symbol she hadn't seen since she was a child, a bird in flight. Wings spread wide. "That's the sigil of the old command network," the girl said. "Your father must have had access. Deep access." Arya clenched the key. "Then we use it." The girl frowned. "For what?" "To break into the Sentinel Core? To shut them down? All of them." The girl hesitated. "Even the ones like me?" Arya looked into her eyes. "No, only the ones who forgot they were human." A long silence followed. Then the girl nodded. "Then we go together." But they weren't alone. High above them a satellite pinged the exact coordinates of the hidden cave. Inside a bunker, far away, General Rains stood in front of a screen. Watching it all unfold, "She found her," he said quietly. "I didn't think she would." Beside him, a young officer asked, "Orders, sir?" Rains turned slowly. His voice was cold. "Deploy Unit 1, to capture, to erase." The night was thick with silence. Only the quiet drip of melting snow echoed through the cave. Arya sat near Lauren, gently holding her hand as she slept. The girl Omega watched from the shadows, her eyes always alert, always listening. The key Arya had received lay on a flat rock between them. Neither of them had touched it in hours, but both knew its importance. "We don't have much time," the girl finally said. Arya nodded. "They're coming, aren't they?" "Yes. But not like before. They'll send one of their units, a prototype like me but enhanced, cold, trained, obedient." Arya swallowed hard. "Can it be reasoned with?" Omega shook her head slowly. "It doesn't know how to listen. Only follow." At dawn, the clouds cleared. A strange calm settled over the forest. Almost a quiet as if the world itself was holding its breath. Arya rose and placed the silver key into a chain around her neck. "Then we move now." Lauren stirred, opening her eyes. "You're leaving?" Arya knelt beside her. "Not leaving. Just one step ahead. We're going to find the entrance to Sentinel Core. The keys for something deep inside, maybe something my father left behind, maybe a way to shut them all down." Lauren gripped her arm weakly. "Be careful. They're playing a bigger game than we see." "I know," Arya whispered. "But I'm not playing anymore. I'm ending it." With a backpack of gear, a thermal map, and Omega leading the way, they slipped through the forest at sunrise. For 5 hours they climbed icy ridges and crossed hidden valleys far from any roads or signals. Every time Arya looked back, she swore she saw movement behind them, but nothing ever came close. Then they reached it, an old bunker almost invisible. Beneath vines and snowdrifts, a collapsed radio tower tilted sideways nearby, rusted and broken. The door to the bunker was thick steel, half covered in frost. Omega pointed. "That's it." Arya stepped forward and slid the key into a small panel beside the door. Clicked out. The door opened slowly, moaning like a giant waking from sleep. Inside was darkness. They entered. The corridor smelled of dust, oil, and metal. Red emergency lights blinked dimly overhead. Every wall was marked with faded military codes rooms labeled archives, cryo-wing, and prototype chamber. As they walked deeper, a voice crackled to life through unseen speakers. "Unauthorized entry detected. Please present." "DNA scan." Omega stepped up to the scanner, placing her hand against the pad. It blinked. "Access granted." "Welcome back, Omega 7. Arya looked at her in surprise. "I thought you were Omega." "I am, but they called me Omega 7. I was the 7th, the only one who escaped." They entered a large central chamber. Massive, computer systems lined the walls. At the center was a glass tube empty, but once clearly meant to hold a human body. Arya walked slowly around it. "Is this where you were made?" Omega nodded. "Born, trained, tested. I spent the first 15 years of my life in this room." Arya touched the tube. "This is not a birthplace, it's a prison." Just then, the lights flickered. Hum vibrated through the floor. Then a voice echoed through the chamber. "New one. Cold. Robotic. Omega 7 detected." Arya C-list detected. "Clearance override initiated." Arya's heart dropped. From a sealed door across the chamber, metal gears turned. Then it opened, and stepping through it came Unit 1. It looked human, but only barely. Taller than Omega. Pale skin, no emotion in its eyes. Dressed in a black bodysuit with steel plating across the chest and arms. Its movements were slow, calculated. Arya stepped back instinctively. Omega stood still. "Unit 1, she said quietly. The figure turned its head. "Omega 7, escape protocol violation. Directive, erase." Without warning, it launched forward. Omega pushed Arya out of the way just in time, crashing into the unit with a sharp elbow. The two of them flew across the chamber, smashing into old computers. "Run," Omega shouted. But Arya didn't run. She reached for a nearby console and began typing, searching through old logs, data files, anything her father might have left. Screens flashed by names, protocols, voice memos. Then one log stopped her cold. "Project Override, authorized by Caleb Seatless." She opened it. Her father's voice crackled through the speakers. "If this message is playing, it means everything. Failed. I tried to stop them. I couldn't, but I built in one back door. One chance. It's locked behind my DNA, and this phrase, humanity is not a weakness. It's the reason we survive." Arya stood frozen. Behind her, Omega and Unit 1 battled viciously. Blows exchanged like thunderclaps, metal clashing against bone. Arya screamed, "The override. Omega, buy me 1 minute." Omega kicked Unit 1 back, slamming it into a support pillar. Arya ran to the main terminal. A prompt appeared. "Enter passcode phrase." She whispered the words, "Humanity is not a weakness. It's the reason we survive." Console beeped. Then it lit up. "Override accepted. Command protocol unlocked." Dozens of new options filled the screen. Terminate unit programs. Shut down core. Data purge. Location broadcast. But one stood out. Liberate remaining units. Arya clicked it. A final prompt appeared. Warning. This will release all cognitive locks on remaining Omegas. Risk of unpredictability. She stared at it. Do it. Omega shouted. Arya hit enter. A blinding light filled the chamber. Unit 1 froze mid-step, then fell to its knees. Shaking violently, it gasped. For the first time, Anne spoke. I remember a boy. I was human. Omega stepped forward slowly. Then you're free. Suddenly alarms blared. Incoming aircraft detected. Hostile approach. ETA. 8 minutes. Arya turned. We need to get out of here now. Omega helped Unit 1 to its feet. There's an old escape tunnel. This way. As they fled the chamber, Arya grabbed a final hard drive marked Sentinel Origins. Eyes only. She stuffed it into her bag without looking back. The escape tunnel was narrow, winding, cold, but they emerged into a clearing just as helicopters roared. Overhead. Too late. They were spotted. Gunfire sprayed from above. Arya dove behind rocks. Omega shielded Unit 1, taking a hit in the side, but she didn't stop. Suddenly, a missile struck the bunker behind them, exploding in flames. The ground shook. Arya looked apash, falling like snow, and then dozens of people appeared from the trees. Veterans, cadets, survivors of the old academy system. Lauren stood at the front, shoulder bandaged, but eyes fierce. You're not alone, she shouted. We came for you. They fired up at the helicopters, forcing them to retreat. The sky fell silent. Arya collapsed to her knees, tears in her eyes. They had survived, but now came the real fight. General Rains, watching from his command center, stared in disbelief. As the live feed cut out, he turned to his staff. Shut it all down. Every outpost. Every file. But sir, he slammed his fist on the console. She turned the whole world against us. That girl. She's more dangerous than her father ever was. He stood slowly. Prepare the contingency plan. What plan? The one we swore we'd never use. Ash still floated in the air like snow. Arya stood among the wreckage of the Sentinel core facilities on the sky, heart pounding. Around her, cadets and veterans helped each other to their feet, wounded but alive. Omega, still clutching her side, stood tall beside Unit 1, who now breathed and blinked like a real person. No longer a machine, but this wasn't over. A voice crackled through a salvaged military radio. This is Command Priority Black. All Omega protocols have been compromised. Activate Zero Dawn. Erase all rogue elements. Begin global purge. Omega's face went pale. Zero Dawn means they'll release every last automated drone and wipe clean anything tied to this project, including us. Arya turned to the group. We have to move fast. Unit 1 stepped forward, calmer now, voice fully human. There's one way, but it's a one-way trip. Everyone fell silent. Arya asked quietly, what is it? He pointed to a hidden panel near the bunker ruins. There's a relay beacon. If we link it to the drive you stole, the one with Sentinels, Origins, we can upload the truth to every civilian and military network on the planet. It will expose everything. Lauren stepped beside her. It would make the entire cover-up impossible to hide. No more lies. No more fear. But Unit 1 said, doing so will trigger a location lock. They'll know exactly where we are. We'll never make it out. Omega finished. Arya stared at the metal hatch, then at the drive, then at her father's name on the casing. She held it to her chest. He didn't die for silence. He died trying to stop them. This truth is his legacy. I won't let it die too. With everyone's help, they set up the relay. Arya worked fast, hands flying over buttons, rerouting encrypted files, clearing firewalls, stabilizing the signal. Outside, thunder rolled. Then the sky split open with drones. Hundreds. Descending like a black cloud. Vega's voice came through. A come line Lauren had fixed. Arya, this is Vega. Do not transmit. Repeat, do not. She cut it off. I'm not asking anymore, she whispered. The screen blinked. Upload ready. 10 seconds to transmission. Omega turned to her. You still have a choice. Arya smiled through her tears. No, I made my choice the day they mocked my father's name. The upload began. Drones fired from above, raining bullets and plasma. Cadets stood in front of the bunker, shielding the panel with their bodies. Lauren shouted, hold them off. Vega's team arrived in transports just in time, joining the fight. Arya didn't flinch. On the final second, the screen turned green. Upload complete. Transmission broadcast to global military network. It was done, across the world. Screens lit up in command centers, homes, academies, news outlets. Paused, soldiers stopped, marching children in classrooms stared at footage of Omega experiments, erased cadets, and audio logs of General Rains ordering. Silence and cover ups. And then they saw Arya. Her recorded voice filled every speaker. You were told to forget. You were trained to obey, but you weren't born to be silent. This is not betrayal. This is truth. My name is Arya. I will never bow to fear. The broadcast ended, but not the cost. The drones zeroed in. Arya turned, just as one locked onto her. Lauren screamed. Omega pushed Arya down and took the full blast. She fell back. Bleeding. Unit 1 rushed forward. taking out 2 drones with his bare handspot was hit again and again. Arya held Omega as she bled in her arms. Stay with me, please. Omega touched her cheek gently. I never knew what it meant to be human, until now. Her eyes closed. Silence fell again. The drones began to fall one by one. Deactivated. Global. Override. Someone had responded. Somewhere high above General Rains stood in his war room, pale with rage, as his command systems failed. His assistant whispered. The Senate saw the footage. They've issued a full shutdown. You're finished. Rains turned and saw Admiral Helena Moray standing at the door. You demanded respect, she said coldly. Now you'll live in shame. He was taken into custody, silent, stunned, humiliated. The very room he once ruled now whispered only of disgrace. Weeks later, at the academy, the skies were clear. Memorial banners fluttered gently, its bearing the name of a lost soul. Omega-7, cadets who stood, soldiers who spoke up, and Caleb Silas. Arya stood before the crowd, this time, in full dress uniform. General Moray, now reinstated as head of command, stood beside her. But when she raised her hand to salute, Arya stepped forward. She looked out at the cadets, the officers, the children watching from home, and said, when the general demanded respect, I had no medals to give, no rank to flaunt. All I had was truth, and that truth did what no weapon ever could. It united us. I don't want to be remembered as a soldier. I want to be remembered as a daughter who refused to let her father die forgotten. Silence. Then applause. Then cheers. The academy that once silenced her now roared with her name. And as she stood there, Lorne beside her, Vega behind her, and the ghost of Omega in her heart, Arya smiled, because they didn't just change a system, they changed the world, and it all began with a girl who said no to silence.